This episode is brought to you by Rescue Intelitech, innovating solutions to keep firefighters safe. Their Solo Rescue Decon Washer helps reduce cancer risks by cleaning contaminated gear quickly and effectively. Learn more at rescueintelitech.com because clean gear saves lives. Hi, Chris McLoone here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of our FEMSA Focus podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about extrication tools. We're going to be talking about some of the issues that impact extrication tool manufacturers, and we're going to be talking about how their membership with FEMSA is important to you in the fire service. My guests today are Shelly Elliott. She is the president for North America for Holmatro, and Emilie Maheu. She is the president of AMKUS. So my thanks to both of you for sitting down today. This is still kind of a new thing we're doing with FEMSA, and I can tell already you guys are good to go. You know, sometimes not with FEMSA folks, but there have been other podcasts that I've done where the deer in headlights come on, and you're like, uh-oh. But you guys look like we're pretty squared away today. So thank you again for joining me. I wanted to start off, what we are going through in the fire service right now on a lot of different levels has to do with some challenges that some of our suppliers are encountering. And I'm just curious, are there any challenges? And I'll throw it out to both of you. Shelly, if you want to take it from the start, and then Emilie, you can join in. But just, are there any challenges that you as extrication tool manufacturers need the fire service to know about as we are, planning our purchases and things like that? Is there anything specific right now going on with you guys that we should know?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. First, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this. I think, when we think about our challenges, it starts with the customer, right? And what challenges our customers are facing. And when I think about that specific to, rescue and extrication, new vehicle technology, high strength metal alloys and advanced materials on vehicles today, EVs, overall disaster preparedness, right? We're seeing a ramp up in the number and frequency and severity of natural disasters, staffing, right? Budget tightness. The list kind of goes on, but I think those are the big ones that our customers are facing that really shape kind of what challenges we need to be aware of and thinking about what are the real solutions that we need to bring to market. And I think for Holmatro, part of how we've been approaching this is, we don't want to just be the extrication tool company. We really want to be a holistic rescue solution provider, all under the Holmatro brand name that our customers have kind of grown to trust. And I think that starts right with the extrication side, but also thinking about, where customers, I'll give you an example. Our newer T1 forcible entry tool, right? I have a lot of customers make comments to me about, well, I don't think the fire service really needed that. And I said, well, maybe your department doesn't because you have staffing and budget and the time and training resources needed. But for rural departments that are doing 90% EMS calls and they arrive at a house where somebody needs assistance and they can't get in, they need 30 seconds of training. And oh, by the way, don't need a second person to leverage that type of solution. And so I think for us, that's how we're sort of approaching, what some of these challenges are, and maybe trying to come at it from a different level of, how do we design things that, meet customer expectations, are very well performing, are intuitive, and that just add a lot of value to our customer base.
Emilie, how about you?
Yeah, so I would iterate everything that Shelly said. Absolutely. There is funding challenges. There's where we have car manufacturers coming out with new technologies. And so there's a little bit of a catch up of making sure that the tools can meet those new standards. You're seeing that because of funding, you have fire departments that are using tools that are 30 and 40 years old. We get calls for service on those because they can't afford to replace them. And so one of my concerns is that how you think of our tools? Because the tools have changed significantly over the last 30 or 40 years. And is that what you think of our brand? Because there is new technology out there, and the brand we are today is different than the brand we were yesterday. But I would say the number one thing I hear from my travels out in the field is we want it lighter, we want it easier to handle, we want it faster. And I had heard an engineer say once, defying the laws of physics, right? Because if you ask any firefighter, they're going to say, well, I want something that's 20 pounds with 20,000 spreading force. And, it's defying the laws of physics. We really need to continue to focus on how do we make it lighter? How do we make it faster while still being as strong as it needs to be today, especially with those new metals that are coming out and the new technologies, because the cars are getting tougher. And so the tools have to be tougher as well.
It's interesting. I'm sorry, Shelly, were you about to add?
I was just going to say that's a great point because, technology is just changing so rapidly in so many facets, right? And I mean, you look at we're entering the age of AI. I think that's going to be kind of the big generational shift. This is going to be like the internet equivalent, right, of the late 90s, early 2000s, and probably on a much faster pace and broader scale, I would argue. And so, I think as a manufacturer, that is one of the challenges, is thinking about like how do you keep up with the technology in a way that is sustainable, but that also allows us to continue to support, customers. Because I think the reality is, to Emilie's point, there's very few customers that are going to be making large scale capital purchases like this every 3 years. I mean, we're in the 10 to 15 year type of replacement cycle. And that's just, a little bit of a reality of kind of our side of the industry. But I think, as things are changing and evolving, it does put more pressure on our end to make sure that we have solutions that our customers can use.
Yeah, absolutely. Shelly, you're right on that. 100% right. Because what happens is that technology is changing rapidly, but people don't change out their tools as rapidly as the technology changes, because I think they would, but the funding's not available.
It's interesting that in listening to the two of you, just looking back at my career as a firefighter and where I started in a rescue company, and just how it's not only that, the new vehicle technology exists in general, it's just the speed at which it is changing, and that, that you need to catch up with, and all of that. And then when you consider exactly what you were saying with the replacement cycles, it is a difficult, on the fire service side, certainly, to keep up with all this. But that it really is amazing. I think in the last 30 years that I've been in, just like there were always improvements made, on vehicle construction and things like that. But within the last 10 to 15, just the pace at which those changes are occurring is really amazing. But so I wanted to also talk to you both about FEMSA. This part of this is part of this podcast is, raising the awareness of FEMSA to the fire service, and how, Emilie, I'll start with you on this one. How is being a member of FEMSA, how does you being a member of FEMSA ultimately benefit your customers?
I think that's a great question. And it's funny because I'm looking at Shelly, and I want to say congrats to Shelly for becoming a board member of FEMSA first before we move to the next. So congratulations on that. I'm glad to see her representing. I would say with FEMSA, hands down, it's advocacy, right? Because if we're thinking about it from our customer's perspective, from our end user's perspective, from our fire department, what do they care about? Well, they care about funding, and they care about knowing that there's somebody out there supporting them. And when the manufacturers get together and they go to DC and they walk hand in hand and they sit down with congressmen and senators and they say, hey, we really need to do something here. We need the funding. Here's what our firefighters are struggling with on a daily basis. And we're making those stories very real. So it's much easier for them to vote positively on the impact that needs to happen. And whatever that is, if it's funding or if it's regulation, whatever it is, it's going to positively impact the fire service. And if it's good for our customers and our fire departments, it's good for us as manufacturers. So I think it all kind of rolls through.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think in a world that's very divided these days, and we don't need to go into that, but, public safety in general, but especially the fire service is really a beacon of light, right? Because when that call comes in, you're putting all your differences aside and your shift teams are really rallying around the mission of protecting, lives, property, and community. And that's a really purposeful thing. And I think similarly, for FEMSA, it's really sort of through the channel of the manufacturers and distributors who are supporting, right, the fire service. We are representing, our stakeholders there as kind of one unified, combined voice, right, that really matters, right? And I do think, the work that FEMSA does with CFSI and the GAC to really ensure law and policymakers are very well informed about fire service needs and challenges, and ultimately about, not just ensuring that those, our customers are able to get, funding, support, training, all of the things that they need to be able to support that mission we just talked about, but also recognizing that there is a very strong manufacturing base right here in the US that is supporting local economies as well. I mean, I live and work right here in, Glen Burnie, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore, where Holmatro is based out of. We have roughly 55 employees on the payroll stemming from machinists downstairs that are running our operations and our CNCs to our sales folks out in the field, right? And everybody's supporting that end to end. And I think that's a very important avenue that FEMSA really brings to the table, is kind of covering from manufacturer all the way through to customer, what this industry brings to the US, not just from an economic point of view, but also from the services point of view. And then I think it's another great avenue, sort of selfishly for our companies to have just really great industry connections and chances to, develop, both friendships and kind of some connections and relationships, right? For best practice sharing, learning from one another, and thinking about like, what is it that our customers are up against, and what are we doing to meet those different needs?
Yeah, I would like to add to that, because Shelly, you make a good point. When we come together, we learn a whole lot more, right? It is, especially as leaders, we have our hands in many different buckets and our attentions are in many different places. We have lots of different priorities. Well, understanding the industry is one of the more important ones. And, you and I both spend a lot of time out in the field, but it's hard to know everything. And I would say that with those FEMSA relationships, you can phone a friend and say, hey, are you seeing this? Is this what you're hearing? Does this make sense to you? I think having one another to lean on and to learn from, and to make sure that you're kind of up on the latest of what's going on in the industry is also incredibly important.
And for both of us, we didn't come from kind of the public safety fire service background before coming into our respective roles. And it can be a steep learning curve, right? There's a lot of different sort of sub niches within the industry itself. And, I'll say this too, right? In an industry that in general is 5 to 6% female, we don't see a lot of people that look like us. And so I think FEMSA has been also another avenue where I've met some incredible women, like Liz Paintiff at Turtle Plastics and Haley Tinkew at Lion, and, others. And I don't want to leave anybody out, but others that are a really great voice as well. To new people coming into the industry, and some of us that aren't, maybe represented at the same level.
Agreed.
That's been a common thread through every one of these FEMSA podcasts that I've done so far this year, is that the relationships and the connections that you guys are able to make at those meetings, and how that does trickle down into the fire service as to your customers. So, all I wanted to get into, kind of what's on the horizon. But before I get into that, we talked about new vehicle technology, and we talked about other technologies just a little while ago. And technology is finding its way into just about every nook and cranny of the fire service right now, in the equipment that we use and the vehicles that we operate to supply the power to those tools in some cases, or just to get to the location. So before we get into what's on the horizon, I was wondering if either of you could comment about the technology that is being embedded into extrication tools now. Shelly, I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. Yeah. So I think behind me is a good little billboard, I guess, of our kind of latest and greatest Pantheon series that premiered in 2020. We're on our second version of the Pantheon series, which is our proprietary battery operated extrication line. And, I think about the technology side really kind of in two fronts, Chris, one being the mechanical end and the other being kind of more of the software and data end and where things are going these days. So, I think for us, kind of to what we talked a little bit about earlier, when it comes to, performance and speed and lightweight and that materials and kind of the hardware that's in the tools, we've put a lot of R&D work around kind of our patented pump technology with the 5-stage stepless pump that really automatically adjusts under load. I think we've thought a lot about kind of the ergonomics and positioning and being able to make sure that our customers can get into very tight spaces and be able to kind of position, the tool in different ways. I think now more and more too, there's movements into different smart designs with separate, indicator lights for both the tool and the batteries that are on the tool, so that if there is a problem, you kind of know if it's, tool specific or battery specific, and making it more intuitive and again, user friendly for our customers, not just when they're operating, but also the service and the maintenance end, which is so important, right? Because as one of our salesmen, likes to say, that tool compartment is the one that every time you're opening it, you're using it to save a life, right? That's true of some of the others most of the time, but not all of the time. And then I think, we've put a lot of work as a company into more of that software and the diagnostic side. So our tools have the ability to connect to our Holmatro diagnostic system, where we'll test, pump and motor performance. We'll verify that the tool's getting to max pressure, that the temperatures are under controlled. And there's a comprehensive battery management system that ties into that too, right? Showing battery health, state of charge, et cetera. What I think is kind of, maybe next, and where we're really spending some time looking at this from a customer perspective, is kind of connectivity, right, to tools. Our current tools have the ability to connect to a mobile app from a cell phone, tablet, or computer with Bluetooth that will show, it's very good for start of shift and end of shift checks. It'll show tool data as the tool is being used. But I think that's kind of the next element, is how are we using and leveraging data in a way that adds value to a customer, right, through better performance, better uptime, better reliability, and better serviceability.
Emilie?
Yeah, so I think it's an exciting time because, as Shelly mentioned earlier, you've got AI. And if you look back in the early 2000s, that's when lithium batteries first came out. And the ability to have lithium batteries is what helped us get these great battery operated tools. So it'll be interesting to see what comes over the next 5 to 10 years as all those new technologies, I would say, advance. It's interesting though. So I think all the tools on the market, all our competitors, they're all great tools, right? They're all life-saving tools. I don't think we could say a bad word about one another. I think it's really what you're looking for. And what AMKUS has chosen to do is a little bit different. We've gone a different way in the market, and we've said, well, what do you really need when someone is trapped in a car? And let's say it's your loved one that you're trying to get out of that car, and seconds do really count. What do you really care about? You care that the tool is light, that it's durable, that it's fast, and that you can rely on it and that you can get it out, and get it working and get that door and get that person out of the car as quickly as possible. Do you really care if there's all this other bells and whistles? And some people really want that, but we are really focusing on that group that says, no, we just want to make sure that we can turn it on and it's going to work exactly the way we want it to. So we focused our technologies more around how do we meet the need of that particular group and still bring new technologies like, for example, we've brought in carbon fiber and titanium so that the tool is more durable and so that it's lighter, but it allows us to get that person out of the car quickly and without any sort of additional worries or buttons or connections or anything like that. And I think you're going to see more of that from other manufacturers as well, because that's what the market is asking for. They want something simple.
We had Kevin Sofin on not too long ago on one of our podcasts, and he's someone who talks about technology in the fire service. He's a speaker all over the place, and that was one of the things that he stresses is that, and it's actually a criticism that on the fire service side we often get is that we're slow to adapt technology and things like that. But one of the things is we're not necessarily slow to adapt it. We're not closed-minded to it, but we want it to work. When we hit the button, we want it to start. We want it to work. So that is definitely something that is common, throughout the fire service. So we talked about, that was the idea I had on that one was, specifically some of the technology, but there's got to be some commonalities that both of you hear out there from your customers, and maybe at a FEMSA meeting and talking with other folks, that there are common things that may be on the horizon in terms of the design of the tools themselves. Emilie, can you comment on, and I'm just talking about in general, it doesn't have to be AMKUS. I don't want you guys to, get into any kind of competition here, but, as far as extrication tool design goes, what are you hearing, and what are some of the things that might be on the horizon industry-wide regarding extrication tool design?
It's an interesting question because I think it's my answer in every single one of these, which is they want it stronger, lighter, faster, and more ergonomic, right? And so that's what we're focused on. I wish I had more to say on that, but really at the end of the day, that's what we're hearing. Shelly may be hearing something different on her side, but our whole goal is to make it more ergonomic, more balanced, lighter, faster, and stronger, because that's what they're asking for. It's, in my opinion, it's not more complex than that. But again, I go back to what I said earlier, over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of changes with things like AI that may allow us to integrate more things. For us, it's been bringing more interesting types of materials that allow us to make our tools lighter.
I think you hit on a lot of them. I think if I go back to just some of the challenges facing the fire service in general, there's a lot of retirements that are happening and will continue to happen, and recruitment isn't necessarily keeping up. So you think about, how do you design something that is very intuitive and user friendly, but that also can possibly, require a little bit less training. And again, I come back to the serviceability and the maintenance part of it, which I think, a lot of what we hear from our customers is that's where they really see technology being able to help and assist them, and that feedback has been very interesting because you hear that from career and volunteers, right? In the volunteer space where, there's not necessarily somebody at the station all the time, but that they know, hey, the tools are there, they're charged, they're ready to go. Or, hey, after this last use, when you plugged it in, the tool didn't perform as expected. You can still use it, but you might want to call for service. Like, that's beneficial to them, right? A lot of customers like that don't have the funding to be on an annual type of service contract where they're doing just straight up preventative maintenance. And so I think that's where technology from a true predictive maintenance point of view can really assist customers regardless of kind of the segment that they fall into, right? That's business talk for like, are they career, volunteer, the way that we kind of look at dissecting the market a bit. And I think the other maybe avenue that we try to use some of our motorsports partnerships with FIA and IndyCar and F1 and IMSA around are, again, they tend to be kind of the ones that are leading the way and thinking about strengthened, material advancements and strengthening kind of the design of these cars. They're designed to go at 220 plus miles an hour, right? In very strenuous conditions. And so we've done some R&D work in partnerships with them and thinking about, okay, if we're going to make this change or this type of design advancement, can it work for you? Because if it works at those type of speeds and environments and conditions, it's going to work, in a metro area or a rural area. And so I think that's where, as we kind of continue to keep our ears to the ground and think about what is it that our customers need, there's avenues to do that. But, lighter, faster, reliable, and cheaper where possible. And I think that's where, kind of really understanding what's the value to the customer so that we can best position it, a solution to them comes into play.
I think you make a good point there, Shelly, because motorsports does give us some indication of where things are headed. And I would say, like, when we work with NASCAR and HRA and World of Outlaws, we get that feedback and we incorporate that into the tools. That's one of the areas that our carbon fiber came from. But to your point, you often see it there. And that helps give us as manufacturers the ability to pivot as necessary.
No, we've talked a lot about, especially in the beginning of the podcast today, just about the challenges that you see as extrication tool manufacturers are sort of being driven by the challenges that the fire service is encountering. But are there any issues that sort of float to the surface for you that you hear that the fire service faces in the area of extrication? I mean, is it solely the acceleration of new vehicle technology and how much it comes out? Is it more of a getting the information to the fire service, like or a training thing? Are there any issues that face this part of the fire service that you, the extrication component, that you two are aware of? Shelly, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of them. I do think there are some that are sort of geographic specific and maybe specific to, kind of the customer, the location, and the community support that they have, more in terms of like how many surrounding departments that there are, and the way that they're set up to be able to respond to certain instances. I think there's a lot of areas where infrastructure isn't necessarily like keeping up as well. You think about roads and bridges, it's not a secret that the US infrastructure score is not great. And so I think when you get into some of these metro areas, where streets are really crowded, there's a lot of traffic, a lot of distracted driving, even as cars have tried to keep up with sensors and warning lights and alerts, the fact of the matter is there's still vehicle accidents. And so equipping first responders to be able to handle the wide array that they see, right? Logistics, there's a lot more heavy truck traffic on the road, right? Which tends to add to severity and complexity, whether that's, underrun scenarios or overturns. I think the other big one that we just briefly touched on is just the amount of training required, right? Extrication, as I've kind of come to learn, and I have a lot of respect for those that can do it in the field. It's a lot of technique and science, but also with some art, right? No two extrications are exactly the same. And I think the level of training that, first responders have to be able to respond to those kinds of scenarios is only going to get more and more heavy, right? With the type of things that they're seeing. And so, I think one of the sort of perspectives that we take here when we're thinking about, a Holmatro customer specifically is, in general, I think our customers want to be prepared for what's possible, not just what is probable, right? And so that's where, as a company, our sort of focus on holistic rescue and what could come with extrication is really important, and where we've taken our strategy. And that's where some things like, shoring, forcible entry, lifting bags, stabilization are really coming into play. And I think it's part of our role as a manufacturer kind of in this industry to make sure we can be that sort of holistic kind of rescue solution provider and provide some training and support along that end, whether that be through us or dealer partners or some of the strategic kind of training relationships that we have out in the country. So.
Yeah. And I think my answer would be, how much time do we have? Because I think there's a long list, right? This is where I always like to plug that my daughter is in the fire service. She's a student at Mississippi State University and is a volunteer firefighter. And so I feel like I have a little bit of a glimpse into the front lines of a volunteer firefighter and the struggles they have with it's funding, training, right? There's this host of things. And as a company, we've tried to address that by having things like AMKUS Academy, which allows you to get out there and put your hands on the extrication tools and to practice, because so often they might have a training that's a couple of hours and they get to put their hands on the tool and use it for just a few cuts, and then it goes on to somebody else. So offering some support around training. But I think the funding is the biggest piece. And I think that's for the overall fire service, right? It doesn't matter which manufacturer you're talking to. If they can't afford to fix, replace, or upgrade their tools, whether it be my tool or apparatus or any number of things that they need, it makes it really difficult. And the other thing that I've been hearing out in the field is volunteers. They need more. People aren't volunteering as much, or if they are, they're not there as often as they need them to be. And so many people in our fire service are struggling because they need those new volunteers. And then I think even Shelly, you may have mentioned it earlier. I'm pretty sure that when they come in, they're younger and haven't been exposed to as much, and they still need a lot of training and support so that they can do the job that we're asking them to do. So again, I could probably go on for another 10 minutes because there are a lot of challenges that our fire service face. And I think our goal for both companies, and I think any company you talk to, is to try to help support that.
Well, again, my thanks to both of you for joining me today to talk about this. It seems like we've covered a lot in a very short period of time. But Emilie, I'll start with you on this one. Just to kind of wrap it up and bring us home for both of you. Any general comments about extrication tools and or FEMSA's role in this part of the industry, Emilie?
Oh, great question. So I would say if you're not involved with FEMSA, certainly get involved. If you're a manufacturer, I think it's a great way to make some new friends, to network, to learn about the industry, to be better at your job. And that's, the whole goal is we want to get better every day. And as far as extrication, I would say if I'm talking to a firefighter, I would say you got to put your hands on the tools and train. And we would love you to reach out to us. And I'm sure Shelly would love you to reach out to her. We would love to give you some tool time so that you can practice and you can see what the tools really can do.
Yeah, I would echo what Emilie said for manufacturers or people involved in the industry that aren't involved with FEMSA to highly consider it. We all have a lot of demands on, our resources, whether that be time or money. This has been a pretty high ROI, I believe, for our company and, some of the leaders at Holmatro that have gotten involved in FEMSA in different ways. I think, again, this might sound a little funny, but again, not coming from the industry, general comments about extrication tools. I've been very fortunate in my life. Like, I grew up in very rural Pennsylvania, played a lot of sports growing up. My dad was a basketball coach. We were on the road all the time. But never once was I or a family member in a vehicle accident that was, a little small fender bender, but nothing that was serious enough to warrant me ever thinking about what would a firefighter use if I couldn't get out of the car and walk away myself? And I think one of the most rewarding things about this job for, our employees and the people that are the faces, the hearts, and the minds behind the different, brands that you see out in the field is it is very purposeful and meaningful, right? You're literally saving lives every day. And there is something so meaningful and valuable in having that strong sense of purpose. A lot of people will tell you that. It's one thing to walk the walk, to talk the talk. It's another thing to be in a position where we literally can walk the walk, right? We're not manufacturing widgets here. These are very meaningful and purposely built tools that are designed to save a life. And I think it's very satisfying to be a part of this kind of niche in the fire service where, yes, there are many other products that are doing that. But Extrication is just, I'm biased, but it's fun. It's kind of sexy. It's got a jazz to it. And I love kind of seeing people out in the field get a chance to do that, because kind of the engine nerd in me also likes dissecting. Again, there's no two ways to kind of same ways to accomplish tasks. People are going to approach a similar situation and problem solve it very differently. And that's where kind of the wheels start turning then about, what could we do to help them do this better, faster, safer, more effectively or efficiently. So it's been really fun to kind of tie all of that together.
Do we have time for a short story that I think illustrates to something? Do we have time?
Sure. Yeah.
So to Shelly's point, neither one of us were from the fire service, and I've been really just enamored with the fire service. It's an amazing place to be, and the amount of community and how it's a large place, but it's so tiny that everybody kind of knows everyone. And I will tell you, about a year ago, my daughter was in a bad car accident, rollover car accident. Luckily she was okay, after a visit to the hospital, but it was the next day I got a call from my dealer that said, "Hey, I heard your daughter was in a car accident." I said, how did you know this? He said, because the chief who went to her rescue actually called me to check on her. That's how small a community it is. I guess when my daughter got out, she said, "Well, are you using AMKUS tools?" She wanted to make sure that they were using the tools that her mom sold. So I think it's just a great example of when people are in the fire service, they're absolutely all in. And it's really hard not to be in love with that. So to Shelly's point, I think we're both in love with the fire service.
Well, perfect. Again, my thanks to both of you for sitting down with me today. If there are FEMSA focused topics you'd like us to touch on, please let me know. I'm at chris.mcloone@clarionevents.com. Also, if you would like to see any of our previous FEMSA focus episodes, they are all archived at www.fireapparatus.com/podcast. So again, Shelly, Emilie, thank you very much for joining me today. Have a good one, everyone, and stay safe. This episode is brought to you by Rescue Intelitech, innovating solutions to keep firefighters safe. Their Solo Rescue Decon Washer helps reduce cancer risks by cleaning contaminated gear quickly and effectively. Learn more at rescueintelitech.com, because clean gear saves lives.